Right, so conformational considerations with your horses. Now you can play on anything. There's even been an appy that's had a wardrobe full of pony rugs. And when I was a kid, there was, I'm not sure what their thoughts were, but they put thoroughbred horse over a Clydesdale mare and tried to make polocrosse horses out of them. And the problem is that by the time they got wound up to speed, they were already over the back line, and then it took them 2 fields to turn around to come back. So I think you can call that one a failed experiment. But you can play on anything. But when we're going fast and we need turnarounds, we want those front feet to be really mobile, light and free. And we also need there to like drive from behind like a rear-wheel drive car. So we need our hips to be wider than our front end. So when you look at a horse from front on, is another terrible drawing for you, but you want to be able to see his hips past his shoulders, right? And I don't think it matters what age the horse is. If he's built that way, he's going to be all right. Now, some thoroughbred horses, particularly staying type bred horses, their rib cage, because they've got such big lung capacity, their rib cage is going to be out, like around there. But just imagine, look past and try and see his hips wider than his shoulders are. Because if it's the other way around, if his shoulders are wider than his hips are, then you've got yourself a front wheel drive horse and they're going to pull themselves along rather than drive themselves forward. And it's much more fun doing burnouts in a rear wheel drive car than it is doing them in a front wheel drive car. You can only do them backwards. So they just don't seem to work that well. The other consideration is that, so that's the first thing that I look for when I'm looking at a horse, is his hips need to be wider than his shoulders. But then the other thing that I want to look for is that in between his front legs, right, I want that to be a rectangle or even better, tapered, right? Tape it up to underneath his brisket there, right? Rectangles are also fine, right, when they get a bit square underneath, but that has to be a rectangle shape. As soon as you start getting like square, right, square like that, they start to get they're really hard to pick, especially one-handed, to pick up and ride them around that corner because there's just so much more there to pick up and move. So you want them a narrow rectangle or when they start to taper up there into the brisket, just helps you out. And these rectangle shaped horses, it's just what I've found, like that's square, you don't want that, but a bit of rectangle's fine. So when they're rectangle like that, they seem to be able to move laterally a lot better. So these type horses with the taper, they turn around like that, probably more classic, like a turn into the pocket. Whereas these horses here, when they're a bit square underneath, but it's a rectangle, like, very narrow, a narrow top, they seem to be able to move laterally really well. So like you can gallop sideways on them really nicely. So especially when you're going downfield to goal, you don't always want to have to turn around. Sometimes just a drift sideways, a shift sideways. These horses seem to, like, that's just what I found. These horses seem to do that a lot easier. So you might find that they struggle. These are better turning around horses, but these are better laterally moving horses. So just use them for what they're good at. Right. The other consideration, and there's no right or wrong answer for this, but when you look at how the horse's hips are, right, so there we go, he's got his tail, that beautiful drawing. Right, there's a scale to this, but the horses whose hocks are camped under, right, so there's his hocks down to his foot. The further that is that way, it's more likely they're going to be a stopping horse. And then the further they are that way, so they start getting down so the hocks are almost like behind them, like that. you see the shape that makes for the stopping horse, or the shape, like that's to drag those back feet up and in. But this shape here, when they start getting behind, like behind their tail maybe just a little bit, that's when they're going to propel themselves forward. So you've got a stopping horse and like a power going horse. And, you know, it's not, this is just sort of like a general rule, but like you watch a lot more thoroughbred and thoroughbred type horses that got their hocks camped further back to propel themselves forward. Of course, that's, you know, there's 500-600 years of breeding to get that to happen. And it's your more quarter horsey types that are like really camped under, that, you know, they've been bred for a couple hundred years now to want to stop, to want to get in the ground. So there's no right or wrong answer with that, but this horse is going to be a lot easier to get to want to stop, and he may not go that well because he has to like dig himself up out of the ground to go. Whereas this horse is going to go pretty good, but he's going to have a harder time of getting stopping. So yeah, it's beautiful drawing, but hopefully that's just, when you look at a horse, you can sort of have a bit more of an idea about where his strengths and attributes might be. So his hocks are camped out. Obviously, he has to have hips wider than his shoulders, otherwise don't worry about it. But so this horse is, his hocks are out and he's got a rectangle in between his front legs. So he's going to go forward and go sideways really easily. Whereas this horse here, that's that one extreme. And then this other horse here with his hocks camped underneath him and he's got a tapered front end underneath between his front legs, he's going to stop and turn around like nothing else. But he may not run out of sight in a dark night. So just, you can sort of have a bit more of an idea about what's going on based on their conformation. Everything else, I mean, short necks, yeah, you want the horse to be balanced, right? That big, long, archy, beautiful looking neck can do just as many weird things as a short, stumpy neck, just differently. You know, a balanced horse is really nice, but yeah, these couple of things are going to tell you more about the horse and how he gets around than his length of rein or whatever. And now, on selecting a horse, right, so the more that horse wants to stop and get deeper in the ground, like here's an exceptional drawing of a horse, right, and here he is, his tail, front legs, right. Because for the two things I'm interested in, polocrosse and drafting, it's much more of a rate and a check and a drift and an adjustment of where you're going, rather than a big stop and a big turnaround and then straight lines. Like, you have to adjust your horse a lot more. So those big stops, they're cool, but they also you have to get back out of the stop to now go somewhere. So ideally how I want a horse to stop, where I want his energy to go when he stops, is like if a giant pulled his tail to a stop. So his energy just goes straight backwards, right? Because if his energy goes straight backwards and he doesn't dig and get into the ground too deep, well, his energy to go forward is going to be flat. Like, he can just go forward. He doesn't have to like pick himself up to then canter off again. Not ideal for a challenge horse where they want to see that big stop and then they want to see that big elevated canter take off, and you know, when they change leads they want to do this. The sports that I want to play, I want a horse to change leads without any elevation at all, because it's just done. Right. So the deeper, right, so like a giant pulling his tail, you just want him to just arrest movement, not necessarily stop getting in the ground. Right, so the deeper your stops are, the harder it is for that horse to get back out of the ground, right? So So yeah, where the energy goes in the stop is where it's going to go going forward. So yeah, the deeper that horse gets into his stops, the harder it is for him to like get back up out of the stops to get going again. Particularly when it's, you know, you've got the great equaliser of the cow who does random things. He doesn't run by the playbook, but neither does the other 5 players on the polocross field chasing the ball. Like, random things happen. So if your energy's flat, backwards and forwards, it's much easier to adjust and go.